Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. I'm so glad you could join us this evening. At the bottom of the screen, as always, you will find a phone number where you can get your forecast 24 hours a day. That's 1-800-472-0391. You also have a website there if you have internet access that you can get lots of local and regional, statewide, even countrywide weather and climate data. That's weather.gov/Alaska. And if you ever have any comments, any feedback for us, you can let us know via email at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. Taking a look at our hazards map, not quite as busy as we were yesterday. We do have a winter weather advisory in effect for the Yukon Flats area. That is going to be in effect all the way through 6 p.m. tomorrow, so 6 p.m. on Thursday. That's going to be for blowing snow and snow creating near blizzard-like conditions. The biggest impact here is going to be at the summits on the Steese Highway, where it's going to impact travel. So visibility is going to be incredibly low at times, sometimes less than a half a mile of visibility at those summits on Steese Highway. And then also we're looking at the potential for significant snow drifts on the highway with that snow and blowing snow. So again, that's a winter weather advisory, mostly impacting the summits on the Steese Highway through 6 p.m. on Thursday. The other thing that we have in effect right now is a winter storm warning for the Hyder area in the Panhandle. That's in effect just through 9 p.m. this evening, so just a few more hours that's in effect. And we're looking at heavy snow for the Hyder area. If you're in that area, you've probably already seen plenty of snow today, and it looks like it's probably going to continue for another few hours, with the total duration or the total amount of snow expected to end up being somewhere between 12 and 16 inches. Along with that snow, we're also looking at wind gusts up to about 45 miles per hour. So that is going to create some blowing snow conditions as well and potentially reduce visibility in the area. So again, that's a winter storm warning for the Hyder area, and that expires at 9 p.m. this evening. Taking a look at our satellite imagery, we can see a couple of low pressure systems swirling around. The first is coming into the southwest or Bristol Bay area. That's going to be coming up into the west coast. We can also see some of that cloudiness and maybe a little bit of circulation coming up into the Panhandle, dropping that heavy snow in the Hyder area. And then finally, looking at another swirl of a low pressure system out in the western Aleutians. So if we look at our surface chart for today, we actually have some high pressure over the southeastern portion of the state right near Yakutat. So not a whole lot going on in that area, but we do have that heavier precipitation along the southern end of the Panhandle with that heavy snow. We can see our low pressure system coming into the southwest portion of the state. It's about 978 millibars today, and that's going to be bringing some snow showers and snow up the west coast of the state. And then we also have our trailing low pressure system in the western Aleutians, 983 millibars, also bringing some snow showers to the Aleutians today. For tonight, we are looking at low pressure still over the west coast, so continuing snow and snow showers for the west coast, but it's not looking like a situation where there's going to be heavy snow in those areas. We have high pressure moving over the Panhandle, so those areas where we're seeing snow right now in the southern Panhandle, looks like it may dry out this evening and maybe even get some fog later tonight in those areas. We also have a concern for some freezing spray in the bearing around the western Aleutians today tonight, that should be behind that low pressure system as it moves into the bearing across the Aleutians. For tomorrow, Thursday, we have a slew of low pressure systems on our image. We've got 3 of them down south of most of the state. So we've got that one that's moving into the southern Bering, and then another one that's going to be moving up towards the Alaska Peninsula, and even a third one moving up the eastern side of the Gulf up towards the Panhandle. But most of these aren't going to be having much of an impact at this point yet. So we'll actually see kind of a dry day on Thursday for much of the Panhandle. I know that's a big change from what's been happening for the last number of weeks for that that area. So hopefully a welcome, if brief, pattern change there. Still some snow across the west coast, but again, that's going to be probably pretty light snow. With high pressure over Western Canada, we're looking at that pressure gradient tightening across the eastern portion of the state. So some increasing winds and blowing snow. That's what that winter weather advisory is going to be in effect, is currently in effect for the Yukon Flats area. So blowing snow for that area on Thursday. Looking ahead into Friday, we get that low pressure system moving up further towards the Panhandle, bringing the return of some rain and snow there. We're also looking at low pressure moving up over the Alaska Peninsula, so that's going to be bringing some snow there as well, with a trough moving or arcing up the west coast for probably some breezy conditions and some light snow there as well. But again, one of the biggest things that we haven't seen in a while is a dry area stretching all the way from south central, pretty much up through the interior and up to the north slope. So maybe even some sun that we haven't seen in a few days for a significant portion of the mainland. Moving on to temperatures for Thursday morning, we have our negative temperatures pretty much relegated to the North Slope area. So about -4 to -6 degrees across the North Slope, but warmer temperatures across the interior with positives. We got 3 degrees at Anchorage. It looks like 4 degrees up at Fort Yukon. Temperatures along the west coast looking like they'll be in the teens and then 20s as we head down into the Alaska Peninsula. Also 20s for Thursday morning for much of the northern Gulf Coast. Looks like a warm area, about 32 degrees tonight at Homer. And for the Panhandle, temperatures right around freezing for much of the area tonight. For Thursday afternoon, we have positive temperatures across the entire state pretty much. So even along the North Slope, we're looking at positive single digits. Teens for much of the interior with some 20s along the west coast, getting up into the 30s for the peninsula as well as the Aleutians. Also 30s for much of the northern Gulf Coast, South Central, and Prince William Sound areas. And then some mid to upper 30s, could even squeak out a 40 somewhere in the Panhandle on Thursday afternoon. For Friday morning, we're looking at cooler temperatures across a lot of the inland or the interior areas of the state, with negative temperatures across the eastern interior in particular. 0 degrees at Fairbanks for Friday morning is the forecast, -6 degrees there at Fort Yukon. Also cooler temperatures for much of the west coast with single digits for the Seward Peninsula as well as the Chukchi Sea coast, stretching all the way down to the Yukon Delta area. As we head further south, cooler than it has been, but not nearly as cool as the rest of the state, with lows in the 20s for the Alaska Peninsula and much of the Aleutians. Also 20s for South Central, stretching over to about 21 degrees at Valdez. And then as we're heading down into the Panhandle, it looks like we'll see low temperatures, warmer for the southern portion of the Panhandle in the mid-30s and cooler for the northern portion of the Panhandle with temperatures in the mid to upper 20s. And finally, for Friday afternoon, we are looking at a little bit cooler than what we saw on Thursday for most of the interior. So single digits, still single digits positives for the North Slope, some teens for much of the central interior, increasing to the 30s down through South Central, and our warmest area over the Panhandle looking like 40s, even some mid 40s for portions of the central and southern Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Taking a look at your aviation forecast, starting with Thursday morning. We have a few areas of IFR conditions expected, including north of the Brooks Range, not quite all the way up to the Arctic coast, but stretching from north of the Brooks Range all the way to the Chukchi Sea coast. Also an area of IFR stretching across Norton Sound from the western portion of the Seward Peninsula and St. Lawrence Island down to about the Kuskokwim Delta. We also have some IFR conditions expected around Prince William Sound, stretching almost all the way to Yakutat. For Thursday afternoon, we see those IFR conditions for the North Slope move offshore, mostly into the Beaufort Sea, but we will see some IFR conditions right along those immediate coastal sections of the North Slope east of about AKwx. We also have IFR conditions spreading eastward into the Seward Peninsula, across eastward, the eastern portion of Norton Sound and down to the Yukon Delta, as well as some IFR conditions developing into the Aleutians, also up into the southern portion of the Alaska Peninsula and continuing around the Prince William Sound area. For Friday morning, we'll see IFR conditions spreading up the Alaska Peninsula and into the interior of the southwestern portion of the state up to the Yukon River. Also IFR conditions marching eastward with an incoming low pressure system in the Aleutians and some IFR conditions in the northwestern portion of the state along the Chukchi Sea coast. For Friday afternoon, we'll see those IFR conditions spread further east into the Alaska Peninsula and the Bristol Bay area, as well as most of, in fact, the entirety of coastal southwestern portions of the state. Also some IFR conditions developing across the northern panhandle, especially around the Yakutat area and in the higher terrain there. Pass conditions for Thursday, Anaktuvuk Pass is looking like it'll start out the day NVFR on Thursday, but improve to VFR on Thursday afternoon. Adigan Pass, also NVFR in the morning, improving to VFR in the afternoon. Lake Clark and Merrill Passes, both expected to be VFR during the day on Thursday. Rainy Pass starting out the day NVFR and improving to VFR Thursday afternoon. Windy Pass starting out NVFR Thursday morning, but deteriorating to IFR on Thursday afternoon. Isabel Pass starting out the day with good conditions VFR, but deteriorating Thursday afternoon to IFR conditions. Mentasta Pass also starting out the day Thursday VFR, but deteriorating to IFR Thursday afternoon. Tanita Pass expected to be VFR all day Thursday though. Portage Pass is looking like the opposite, like IFR all day on Thursday at Portage Pass. And Chilkoot and White Pass is both expected to start the day on Thursday and VFR, but improve to VFR on Thursday afternoon. Our freezing levels for Thursday morning, surface freezing levels stretching from the western Aleutians across the Bering, up the Alaska Peninsula through south central and into the higher terrain of the Panhandle. We've got our warmer air coming up from the southeast into portions of the Panhandle with that 2,000 foot freezing level stretching across the central Panhandle and 4,000 feet remaining south of the Panhandle for Thursday. For icing on Thursday, we have an area of isolated moderate icing across much of the mainland above about 5,000 feet. Once we get down to the Panhandle, that's going to be isolated moderate, pretty high level above 10,000 feet. And then another area stretching across much of the Bering from the Bering Strait all the way down to the eastern Aleutians above 4,000 feet. That's isolated moderate icing as well. Our jet stream remains over the Panhandle and stretching over western Canada. That's going to be peaking about 135 knots out of the west and southwest across the Panhandle. We also have some increased winds at the jet level stretching from about Kodiak Island across the northern part of the Gulf at about 75 knots out of the west and southwest. At 9,000 feet, we have a low in the Aleutians with some 50-knot winds out of the west and northwest on the south side of that low. And then our strongest winds with another low pressure system, but still well south into the Gulf, so not impacting land with those winds at this time. At 3,000 feet, same low pressure systems with our strongest winds in the Aleutians, 65 knots for a couple of areas at 3,000 feet. That's going to be winds out of the north and west. And finally, turbulence. We do have some isolated severe turbulence possible in the Aleutians below about 4,000 feet on Thursday.
Welcome
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox. They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're
So
moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
And there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
Oh, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach, that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right? You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right. Right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCoR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKwx, right? EPSCoR, Alaska EPSCoR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation, so more to come from that, and a longer term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for a look at your marine forecast. We'll start out with the sea ice edge, where we're seeing a lot of growth and thickening in the ice from the Yukon Delta northward. There's lots of first year ice out there. And further south, we are continuing to see an active pattern of low pressure systems moving into the area, which is continuing to deplete and push back that ice in the Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Delta area. Expect those trends to continue over the next few days. For southeast, for Thursday, for marine conditions, we are looking at winds out of the east and northeast, 15 to 30 knots over the Gulf, with some gusty winds over the central inside waterways with gusts to about 35 knots. Looking ahead into Friday, we see the winds really pick up with some large seas as well. So we're looking at winds 30 to 40 knots out of the east and southeast right along the coast of the Panhandle, with the strongest winds down south with gusts up to 55 knots. So incredibly strong winds, and seas up to 25 feet for the area. Winds also very strong for the inside waterways on Friday, 25 to 35 knots, with gusts as high as about 45 knots. So definitely a good day to be keeping an eye on the weather if you have any plans to be out in the marine areas on Friday. For Thursday across South Central, we're looking at generally easterly flow 15 to about 30 knots, with our strongest winds near the Barrens between the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. As we head into Friday, we'll see those seas come down a little bit, but winds stay up and even increase some, with 30 knots out of the northeast in the southern area of Cook Inlet and 35 to 40 knots near the Barrens, still out of the east. For Thursday across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, we'll see our strongest winds on the Gulf side, about 30 knots there out of the east and northeast. A little bit lighter on the Bering Sea side and in Bristol Bay, 15 to 20 knots there. And as we head into Friday, we are looking at 20 to 30 knot winds across the board. Some northwesterly flow on the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula, but more southerly flow as we head north towards Kodiak Island. For the Aleutian chain on Thursday, we are looking at our strongest winds across the central Aleutians, 35 to 45 knots out of the west and southwest, and then decreasing as we go either east or west in the Aleutians. So about 30 knots out of the northwest for the western Aleutians and 30 knots out of the south and southeast for the eastern Aleutians on Thursday. And then heading into Friday, we have our strongest winds across the central Aleutians, with those winds spreading a little bit east and also for the western Aleutians. So highest winds 50 knots for the eastern Aleutians. On the map, it's showing as north and south of Nikolsky, those 50 knot winds. But we also have 40 to 45 knot winds throughout the Aleutian chain west of there as well on Friday. For the west coast on Thursday, we are looking at 15 to 30 knots of wind, with those highest winds being out in the open Bering Sea and lighter winds across the ice-covered areas of Norton Sound and near Nunivak Island. Heading into Friday, a little bit of a shift to northerly flow with 25 to 30 knots of wind across the board. And for the Arctic coast, we are looking at easterly flow for most of the Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea coast, but we will have some westerly flow on both the north and south side of the Bering Strait on Thursday. And then as we head into Friday, winds come down a little bit and become a little bit more squirrely directionally. So some southwest flow in the Chukchi, but a combination of northerly and southerly flow along the north slope itself on Friday. Recapping our service charts for tonight, we have that low pressure systems across the west coast will have blowing snow with a winter weather advisory in effect for the Yukon Flats. Again, that's going to be impacting mostly the Steese Highway summits. We also have a winter storm warning in effect for the Hyder area in the southern panhandle. Although you don't really see a whole lot of snow on the map here, that's going to be ending at 9 p.m. this evening for heavy snow in the Hyder area. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal, pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.